had done a study that was called Translating Research into Practice. And I looked at some of their words about the importance of standardization, and they just struck me. So, for example, here's some of them. Evidence rather than opinion should guide clinical decision making. I mean, I'm a clinician like you guys, and we like to continue to do what's always kind of worked for us. Well, it's worked for me for 20 years. I'm going to keep on doing it. Well, that might be fine, your little anecdotal evidence, but unless you can share that and broadly test it amongst patient populations, then it becomes a little limited in your thinking, and it's hard to measure. So we do need evidence, and we're all hearing about evidence-based practice in all areas of healthcare, as indeed we should. The other thing that struck me about this report was that they said that we should be looking at a broader range of patient outcomes in order to understand the true benefits of interventions and risks. So what strikes me here is when you have a patient who comes back from a swallow study, a modified barium swallow study, video fluoroscopy, or even a fiber optic endoscopic examination, and they come back, and the report that's given to the caregiver on the floor is, Mr. Smith failed his swallow study. You think about that. Failed his swallow study. A diagnostic test is not pass-fail. A modified barium swallow study is no more pass-fail than a CT scan. You're there to glean physiologic information about the disorder, to apply interventions that may effectively improve that disorder. And the reason that we've got into a habit of doing this kind of thing is by paying so much attention to aspiration. It's the one thing we all worry about. It is important, but it does not tell the whole story. And I will present data to you today that reveals that over and over again in our work. So if all you're doing is detecting aspiration during a modified barium swallow study, you are doing a very incomplete job. And in fact, I can train any technician to identify aspiration on a modified barium swallow study. It doesn't take a speech-language pathologist with the kind of training that you're going to get today to identify black liquid in the larynx or trachea or airway, a lower airway in a patient. So I want you to keep that in mind. We have to be looking at a broader range of outcomes, and not only physiology, by the way, but patient-reported outcomes such as quality of life, indicators of health and well-being. We need to put it all together because that's what matters to the patient. The other thing that this TRIP report said is that research priorities should be guided in part by public health need. And again, the issue here is we don't really have a true grasp of what the public health need is. We as providers know. I think we have a pretty good idea. But the broad spectrum of people in this country and in this world do not really truly understand the health needs that are implicated in a dysphagic patient. So what happens if we don't have standardization? If we don't have lack of standardization, if it isn't standardized, it will impede our understanding of true functional results. So for example, if you're looking at the same intervention in two different studies and they use a different outcome measure, it's very difficult to compare the effect of that intervention. And if everybody's using a different measurement system, a different schema, we put ourselves into this state of ambiguity. So we really have to step back, I think, and think this through. And by the way, it takes courage to step back. The MBSImP approach, and I call it an approach, it's not just a tool, is really one that's evolved over 10 years now of study. And 10 years before that, probably my clinical experience, that you sometimes when you put out new information, you put yourself up for criticism, and that's what we do in science. It's all about peer review, and that's important. We want you to critically think about the pros and cons of all of these approaches, and I hope you do that with the MBSImP as well. But we do have to be forward thinking and not just do things because we've always done them that way. And it will hinder our understanding if we don't standardize our measures of what we should target in our interventions. I'm going to give you a great example. For years and years and years, we've looked at only the hyoid bone as this major critical movement during swallowing. What I've learned over the past 5 years working with great colleagues like Bill Pearson and others, and my colleague Julie Blair, as we are looking at these swallow studies using this MBSImP approach, we have gained such a better appreciation of other adaptations and compensations that can occur in this mechanism when the hyoid bone is refractory to any treatment. So I think once you start being open-minded about how you assess this disorder and look at this mechanism and realize there's a lot we still don't know, that's when it's exciting, and that's when you will discover new interventions and new approaches to developing interventions. It's a very exciting time.